It's Thursday, it's 8:30 and 20 seconds. Welcome, everybody. Here's Late Night Soaring with the flight of the month, June. Yeah, as every month, we're talking about a lot of flights, or we saw a lot of very interesting flights. And welcome, Benjamin.
Yeah, hello, good evening. This time in English, you'll see in a minute why. Let's get started to take a look at a couple of cool flights which happened in June 2023. It was a pretty interesting month so far. So I thought at the 10th of June already that we had found the flight of the month when Bert Schmelzer, who lives in Switzerland but is actually from Belgium, flew home and back again. Which from Zurich, right? Which is which has never been done before. Super impressive. And I was pretty sure that this was going to be the interview at the end of the month, and I was already looking forward to it. But then a couple of other interesting things happened. So we had to think again. At the end of June, middle and end of June, Stefan Langer actually made a double feature of club class and 15-meter class records. Did a 900-kilometer declared out and return flight from Stillberghof to the end of Jura, Geneva, and back. Also did a 900-kilometer triangle, which is also, I think, a German club class record with the LS3.
Of course, maybe in the 15 meters class as well. I'm not sure.
15-meter class has already been done by the Boettger.
With the LS8 as well.
Yeah, 15-meter class has already been done with the Ventus by the Boettgers, 1,000-kilometer triangle, I think. Which hold the current record, but still in club class, this is unseen. Yeah. Another interesting thing which we want to mention, it's an honorable mention, really, is Sven Olivier from South Africa, who launched in Worcester in Wave, and he sometimes uses to do interesting stuff by flying inland in the Wave, which basically nobody else has ever done. He has done it before a couple of times, I think at least once, really successfully. And this time not so successfully because he landed out at some very remote, I think it was an airstrip actually, and had big trouble coming back, right, Matthias?
Yeah, that was a story behind the scenes, was interesting, which would be very interesting to talk with Sven about, because he has, to walk about 20 kilometers to get back in the range to call with a mobile phone.
Yeah.
And to carry back the aircraft was as well very interesting.
Yeah, you can see here the pictures from the retrieve. This is really adventurous, but they did get back eventually. So
yeah. In the meanwhile, they are back, I'm sure.
Yeah. And also for a couple of days, we were quite sure that this was going to be the flight of the month, June. But then, of course, Gordon Boettger beat them all by doing the furthest glider flight ever, and probably also one of the longest long-distance flights, which were not only for duration, but really for distance. 3,058 kilometers in 17 hours, 40 minutes. This is gliding history. There's a couple of very interesting aspects about the flight. First of all, he flew with an Arcus jet, of which there's only a very limited number. Second of all, they flew partly at night with night vision goggles. Here, just a short preview about the images when they launched at night. This is extremely interesting, and we'll hear about this. And we are really happy to say that tonight we have the man with us. So welcome, Gordon Boettger.
Benjamin, Matthias, schönen Abend. Wie geht's? Gut?
Yeah, thank you. Very good. So we know you speak very well German, but we decided to make the show today in English because I think this flight and all the circumstances are very interesting for the whole glider community and the whole world. So we decided to speak in English. So first of all, congratulations to this fabulous flight.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very much appreciated.
And we'd like to hear a little bit about your person. What are you doing for a living? When did you start gliding? Where did you start gliding?
So I began gliding. My father, Wolfgang, he was in the German Air Force, and so he was a glider pilot, aviator, and flight instructor when he moved to the United States. Worked for McDonnell Douglas, and when I was young, he decided to take me up in our Schweitzer 232 in the back seat and give me a few rides. And then at age 13, he asked me if I was interested in learning how to fly. I was doing a lot of surfing back then, and I knew that I never wanted a job sitting behind a desk. So I figured the airline route was the best way to go, and the best way to do that was to start off with the gliding. So at age 13, I started with the soaring and gliding, and at age 14, I sold it on my 14th birthday, and then started a little bit of power flying. But I became very interested in cross country soaring at a very young age. It was very challenging to me, and that intrigued me. And you know, having basically some of the best soaring conditions in the world, I really wanted to take advantage of that, since since this is a playground for soaring. So there was a brief delay, or probably an 8-year delay, in most of the soaring that I did from the age of 21 to about 29 years old, because I joined the Navy, the military, and I flew in the military for 8 years. So I was on 2 different aircraft carriers, the USS Ranger and then the USS Constellation, flying off of aircraft carriers, which was pretty interesting. And but my goal was to get to the airlines, and so I did my time in the military, and then shortly right after the military, I joined with FedEx, and where I started as a flight engineer on the DC-10, and then moved up to the right seat of the MD-11, and 10 years after that, the left seat of the MD-11. So at 1996, I got hired at FedEx, and I've been with them since. So now I'm captain on the 777. Been flying the 777 for about 5 years now, all international flying. So, but soaring is still my passion, and this is my go-to for fun flying, and I think it's the most challenging thing, and I'm trying to help grow the popularity of the sport, hobby, whatever you want to call it, through some of the flying that I'm doing, and hopefully that's happening with these flights. But the wave has always been very intriguing to me because of the power, and it can really it's something you have to respect. It could be very challenging, but also very rewarding, as you saw with my last flight here on, I think, the 19th of June. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and your home airport for gliding is Minden, Terre, as we know, and you're living as well in the vicinity of Minden, or where do you live?
Yeah, so I'm about 10 minutes from the airport.
Okay.
So I moved up 20 years ago. I was living in San Diego because that's where I was in the Navy. And I moved up to basically the heart of soaring in the United States. And I absolutely love being here. So I feel very fortunate to live here. And I always try to point out to people, I think there are a lot of people that would love to do what I'm doing, and I'm sure could do what I'm doing, but they just don't live in the area that allows them to do the flights that I do. So I wouldn't say that I'm particularly special in anything, but having this weather over my head, literally, I think gives me a huge advantage, and I thank whoever for that. So that's that. But it's Minden is a very special place for both thermal and wave flying.
Yeah, we talked already with Jim Payne about the area in a session in January from late night soaring. So I think let's go first of all to the specialty of the aircraft you're using. You're using an Airbus jet, and as far as I know, there are just 6 in the world, aircraft like this. Okay, yeah. So I think it was roughly 5 years ago, Dennis Tito, who was really involved with trying to get OLC points through these yo-yo wave flights. He purchased 4 Arcuses from Schemperth. So what he essentially told Schemperth, he said, okay, I want an Arcus, and I want it to go fast, and I want it with a lot of battery capacity and a lot of oxygen capacity. And those are the 3 things that are really required for I think doing these special long flights. For me at the time, I found out that Dennis had bought these 4 Arcuses, and at the time I was flying a Duodiscus, and I'd had some really good flights in the Duodiscus, which were they were special flights to me, because it's not a super ship,
but I was able to get some good flights with that. And I felt at the time I just kind of reached the limit with what I can do with that duo discus. Plus it was legal for night, but I didn't have night vision goggles. So doing night cross country would have been pretty dangerous. So I didn't go there with that. And then about 2 years ago, Dennis Tito decided he was done with soaring and sold 2 Arcuses, 2 of the first Arcuses. There was 6 Delta Tango, 7 Delta Tango, 8 Delta Tango, and 9 Delta Tango. Airbus bought 6 Delta Tango and 7 Delta Tango, one of which they tore it apart and they put, I think, hydrogen bottles in there to do contrail testing. So that glider, I don't think we'll ever get back in a situation where we'll be a regular Arcus again. 6 Delta Tango, the other Arcus that Airbus bought, is still fully functioning Arcus jet that is here at the Minden Airport. So actually all 4 of these jet Arcuses are still at the Minden Airport. When I found out that Dennis was selling the Arcuses, I figured that was one opportunity that I would be able to acquire or have a glider that can do these type of flights I've always dreamed about. And there was nothing, actually just nothing I had to do to change anything on the glider. The thing is, it's the ultimate wave machine. Still very good in thermals, obviously. It's an Arcus. So, but the big concerns with these big wave flights is oxygen capacity, and then also battery capacity. And those issues were all resolved with Dennis Tito's Arcuses. They were all identically made, with the exception that the last 2 had the engine instruments coated especially for the night vision goggles, because the lights on the backlit instruments emit a certain frequency, and apparently the instruments have to be coated so they're not too bright and what we call blow out the night vision goggles. So I actually have these night vision goggles right here. So these are L3 night vision goggles. They are TSO approved. So they are legal approved goggles, and they mount on a bracket up here. They tilt down, and there's on and off switch, and also a special battery pack that goes behind your head, because these are actually very heavy. So these goggles, these go in the front, the battery pack goes in the back, and that balances the weight out. Otherwise, your neck really starts hurting after a few hours wearing them. So these are actually still used by the military now. And it's a white phosphorus lighting. So very, very expensive night vision goggles, but I got those with the Arcus. Dennis had 2 night vision goggles, and I got both of those when I bought the Arcus. So
okay, we won't talk about the price of the Arcus, but my question is, so you're wearing the night goggles during the whole 17 hours?
No, no. So, what Dennis Tito, being much smaller, he had the space to have a full helmet on, which is great. And you can see in the pictures that Bruce Campbell had, my co-pilot had, he was sitting in the front seat. I was sitting in the back because I'm over 2 meters tall. And when the night vision goggles are up, you're adding, probably 10 centimeters of height or something. And you need a lot of room to maneuver your head to see it at night with the night vision goggles. So I sat in the back seat, but so I bought I found a website. It's a military website where they sell like a soft helmet type thing. And I wore that, and I can show that to you. It's the first time I've worn that, and it seemed to work out okay. But here's the bracket that the night vision goggles go in. So this is the front of it, and this is the battery pack that the battery goes in the back. So what I wanted to be able to do, and this is the first time I've done it, going from night to day, you have to be able to take those goggles off because they're so restrictive. You just don't have the space to maneuver your head in the cockpit if you're a tall person. So I wanted to be able to take the goggles off and then take this off, fold it up like this, and just stick it behind me. And you have to be aware that you might need those the following night if you keep flying. So I think my setup is a perfect setup I have now. But essentially, when the light comes up enough there's too much light for the goggles, and they're ineffective, and there's no need to wear those during the daytime.
Actually, it was a stupid question from my side.
No, it's not a stupid question. Because a lot of people don't understand. I didn't understand the whole concept of night vision goggles either. You know, it obviously makes sense. You don't really need to wear them during the daytime, but there's a lot to the goggles. They're very very special devices, and I wish, and hopefully in the near future I can do a video where I can show what I'm seeing through the goggles. It's absolutely incredible, because when we took off at 2:30 in the morning, we were flying south, and we were looking at the Milky Way and shooting stars and satellites in the amount you can see with the night vision goggles, and seeing clouds, rotor clouds. I thought, I was like, you feel like you're in an IMAX movie. It was unbelievable. And when the sun did come up, it was a little depressing having to take those off, because it was just unbelievable watching, you know, looking at the inside of a glider cockpit at night with the instrumentation and the sky sight showing me where the wave is, and looking at the same time, looking at the stars in the Milky Way. It's unbelievable. I mean, I wish I could take everyone up and show them what these night vision goggles do. It's really, really special.
I think we do have some pictures for the night vision you have already.
So yes, I do have some video from night vision. I think I do have some stills that were on WeGlide, but I do have a video that's pretty neat, and I think I did post it on Instagram. But we'll share this here. So this video you're going to see was just a quick clip going probably an hour into the flight at almost 24,000 feet, flight level 240, and we were southbound. So here we go on the video. So that is some video that's going about, like I said, about an hour into the flight. And then let me share some other video. So this photo was taken at 3:40 in the morning. So you can see with this particular iPhone, it really picks up the light, but you can see off in the distance, way off to the east, the sun is starting to come up, but it's still very, very dark on the ground. And this is going a little later. That's just to show the sky sight. And just don't forget to remind me about talking about sky sight here, and Matthew Scudder and his wonderful product here in a bit. This was going a little, this is continuing southbound, I think still north of Bishop. Here's the sun coming up, so you can see the view is just spectacular, seeing the transition going from night to day. And that's Bruce up in the front seat, so he had taken that picture. So now we're at the point. I think the iPhone's picking up quite a bit of ambient light. So you can see now that I think we're northbound now, but now is pretty close to the time where we take the night vision goggles off, because it's just too bright with them on, and it's really not needed anymore. That's, I think, posted on WeGlide. And that's coming up near Owens Dry Lake off to the right. That's northbound after the first turn point. So you can see there are very few markers. Owens Dry Lake, which is typically a dry lake in the Owens Valley, you can see is pretty wet this year because we've had so much snow. And I know some of these pictures are a little repetitive, but this is coming up onto Mount Whitney.
I have one more question. As you said, the Arcus came with the night vision goggles, and also the instruments were already coded in the way that it was compatible to see with the night vision goggles. So does gliding at night have a history before you, or were you guys the first ones to actually try it?
Well, I think for the cross country, I think we're Tim Gardner and Dennis Tito had flown some nighttime stuff in this particular ARCUS, but they didn't cover the distance using these night vision goggles. I believe that we did, or fully utilize them, because Dennis Tito had stopped soaring. But the whole concept was to be able to extend these flights into the evening hours and doing it safely at night. But I think historically there was, back in probably the 50s and 1960s, I believe that they did have duration records, which were done mostly on the ridge. One example, I think, was in Dillingham Airfield in Hawaii, flying back and forth along the ridge. But what happened is it became too dangerous. So I believe the FAI pretty much prohibited any flying between, the 30 minutes after sunset to 30 minutes before sunrise thing. So that's an issue that that comes up, because people, say, well, is this a world record? No, it's technically not, because first of all, I used more than 3 turn points, and secondly, I didn't comply with the FAI rules. So I hope that I'll probably try to address this with the FAI and see if we can make a change there, because I think this type of flying, with especially with 2 people and a set of night vision goggles, can be safely done. So hopefully they'll understand that and maybe make a change. If they don't, that's not going to stop me from doing what I'm doing, because I mean, for me, it's, to die with plaques on the wall doesn't make, it's not going to make any difference for me to have any records. It's all about, I think, the fun, the sharing of it, and exploring whole new boundaries. I think of it a lot like competitive surfing versus the people that are just surfing big waves and traveling around the world and not doing it for rankings or competition. So if the FAI doesn't recognize it, that's fine. That's totally fine. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep trying to set new boundaries and go further and try to get some interest in soaring going on. And because I think it's in a decline in the United States anyway. And I think this is pretty interesting, the stuff with the night vision goggles. For some reason, the night thing is really getting people all hyped up and excited. And I guess I can appreciate that. But it's having those NVGs is really special. So definitely there's a lot of practice that needs to take place. You can't just go out and do it. And so it takes a lot of practice and time to get used to these things. But I think we're in a situation where we can safely do it. So that's where we are with that.
When we look at this picture, many people ask about the double glass in the front canopy.
Right. So the purpose of that is to create basically a layer. It's simply a piece of plexiglass you can get pretty much anywhere, but it's that actually came out of the duodiscus. I have a big sheet that I'm trying to make 2 panels for the front and back seat. I've just been too lazy to cut it out yet for the back seat. And every time I think the wave season's over, something else comes up. And so it seems like I'm always rushing into these flights. And, every time I put that front panel in, I keep kicking myself that I didn't do it correctly for the back seat. But essentially what you're doing is putting this layer of plexiglass inside the canopy. And that's that gray part you see around there is just foam protecting it. So there's basically a layer of airspace, a layer of air between the plexiglass and the canopy, and that creates some warmed up air, and it works like magic. You do not get any icing on that. The one thing I was not sure of was doing this at night, because obviously there's not much greenhouse. You're not heating the cockpit through the sun, so there's no heating going on in the cockpit other than your body heat. So it was a little hard. I couldn't figure out whether those night vision, the clear vision panels would be effective at night. And I don't think I don't quite have the answer to that yet, because I did fog up in the back, and that can become very dangerous when you're on the night vision goggles, because it looks like you're flying in the cloud, and you have to look to the side of the goggles and then use the light from the map light, the green light, to see what's actually going on in the canopy. So I did start fogging up in the back seat, and that's because I didn't have a clear vision panel. So I had to open all the vents, and you don't want to open vents up at 24,000 feet at 3 a.m, but I had to. So there's some things you have to compromise, and suffer a little bit for these type of flights, but so be it.
Okay, but I like to point out one thing with the legality of the flight. You said the flight was legal because you are allowed to fly within the night because you have also navigation lights.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes.
But and it's not the discussion if it's would be a world record, but you said the FIA requires the flight between 30 minutes before sunrise and 30 minutes after sun set for records, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. So the legality of the flight has nothing to do with the night vision goggles.
Yeah. Right.
Now, to use the night vision goggles, I have to have an FAA sign off. So I have to have had the training and the in-flight practice and have an FAA examiner that is qualified on the night vision goggles give me an endorsement or a sign off for my logbook. So I am legal to use the night vision goggles, but I could take off at night without the night vision goggles. That would be pretty stupid to fly cross country without them at night. So, but the navigation position lights, they're the things that make you legal to fly at night in the United States.
Yeah, it might be different in Germany or in Europe, but that's the legality for the flight in the state. I do have a question concerning the normal instruments. Aren't they too bright for the night vision goggles?
No.
Screen?
If I turn on my iPhone, it will, what we call, blow out the night vision goggles. You don't really see, you can't see well through the night vision goggles at all, because the iPhone screen doesn't have the coating that's compatible with the night vision goggles. And there's a certain amount of science there I don't understand, but all of those instruments, with the exception of that phone with the Sky Sight, because that Samsung phone is not coated. So that was actually very bright, and I had to push that down or turn it off sometimes so I could use the night vision goggles properly. But the instruments, the lit up instruments, even when they're bright, do not, it will not create with the night vision goggles, it will not create a reflection on the canopy. Now, if I have an iPhone, or someone has an iPhone on in the cockpit, and I'm using the night vision goggles to land at night, you'll see a massive reflection on a canopy, and you can't look out, you can't see outside because there's so much, it's so bright and so much reflection. So that can become very dangerous. So if I ever fly with someone, I make sure to brief them that everything's turned off, that is not coated. You know what I mean? So yeah. So it's the takeoff and landings are very critical because you're taking off on a completely dark runway.
Runway is not lighted? So no light?
No.
Okay.
It's I think in the near future I'll do a video of a takeoff at night. I mean, if you're standing outside of the glider, you cannot see a thing. It's unbelievable. So you're taking off without the lights because the lights are too bright for the night vision goggles. So, so if someone were to come in and land and turn the lights on, that wouldn't be too good for me taking off with the night vision goggles. I'd have to tilt those up because it would be too bright. So you're taking off on a completely dark runway, correct?
Okay, that was one point of this specialty of this aircraft. The other thing is the jet. So let's talk a little bit about the jet. We know some jet sailplanes, but it's not for self-launch. I think that's the only self-launcher.
Yes, I think that's the only self-launch jet. So there's really nothing special about the jet itself. The fact that it's on a glider makes it, I guess, somewhat special. But the jet was installed by Bob Carlton, who's literally a rocket scientist, and he's living out in Moriarty, New Mexico, which is another good spot for soaring. But Dennis Tito, when he bought 4 of the Arcuses, the thing that he got special from Schemperth was the fact that it has a higher VNE up at altitude compared to a standard Arcus coming out of the factory. So I'm able to operate at a much higher indicated airspeed. I think like at flight level 310, I think my max indicated is 151 knots, which is just, it's mind blowing. And a good example, I mean, like with the Arcus or with the Duo Discus, I think my max airspeed at 20,000 feet was like 85 knots or something. But now I'm 20,000 feet with the Arcus, I think it's 141 knots. So that was special coming out of the factory. When it got to the United States, all 4 Arcuses were sent to Bob Carlton over in Moriarty, New Mexico, where he installed it's a Czech made. It's called a PBS TJ100 engine, and I think they're used mostly for drones. So Bob Carlton did the installation and the flight testing on that, and it holds about 23.5 gallons of gas. I don't know what that is in liters, but it's a very extremely
100 liters.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it's around 100 liters, a little bit less.
Okay, so the wings have 2 fuel bags in each wing. So we have 7 gallons in each, essentially 7 gallons in each wing. So that's 14 gallons, and another the rest of that is in the fuselage tank. So under takeoff power, we're burning about roughly 30 gallons an hour. So if you're at takeoff power, that gas will go away pretty quickly if you remain at that takeoff power. I typically will burn about whether it's on a thermal flight or a wave flight, I'll typically burn about 4 to 5 gallons on a self launch. And then, that would probably give me 17 or 18 gallons to get home with if I needed to. But the whole purpose of the jet engine with Dennis Tito, he wanted to be able to fly a long wave flight and then have a reliable source of power to get home if he needed, and regardless of temperature and cold soaking and things like that become an issue with a propeller driven engine. So I'm very, very happy with the engine. It's extremely reliable. It's very, very noisy. And I think that's an issue with the Europeans, here in the United States, it's not a problem, but people.
It's louder in the States than in Germany.
Yeah. You have a couple of pictures from the jet engine.
Yeah, let me see if I can find. Okay, so here's the jet engine. I took a video of this in the hangar of the engine coming up, and here we go.
It looked like it's the same box as it was an Arcus M, isn't it?
That's exactly it. So you can see the engine bay is exactly the same. And actually the first Arcus that he had the engine in it, and he removed the engine, sold it, and put the jet in there. So it's the same engine box as the Arcus M. So the whole mounting and installation is a little different. That's the engine looking from behind. And as you can see, there's a split exhaust on the back, and that's so you don't overheat the vertical stabilizer. So that exhaust kind of gets split up and goes around the vertical. Okay, so you don't end up melting.
Yeah, that would be my next question.
So that's, as you can see, that's a regular engine bay. Here's once again the raising and lowering. You can see the oxygen bottle in the back. That's one of the I guess, bigger bottles. There's another massive bottle below that built into the fuselage. So that, yep, so that is a Checkmate PBS TJ 100 engine. Here is a takeoff.
What climb rate you achieved with takeoff power?
The climb is probably I would in feet per minute, probably 700 feet, 700 to 800 feet per minute.
So that's 3 to 4 meters per second.
It's pretty good. And so your best climb speed, Bob Carlton did all the flight testing. The best climb speed is 85 knots. So you're climbing pretty fast. And
that's 150 kph. Yeah.
So yeah, you're going along pretty good. I've had to use the engine once on a wave flight that ended in Bishop, and I had, like I said earlier, I had about 17 or 18 gallons left on the in the motor. What happened? We had the wave had quit. Cold front had come through here, and I had that prediction. And sure enough, when I got to Bishop, which is probably it's almost 150 miles, let's say 200 kilometers from here. I ended up having to use the engine to get back. So I climbed up, and I had to climb over clouds, around, and there's snow showers, and it was but using the engine was pretty neat. So I was able to climb back up to like 17,000 feet and go over and under weather and around weather, and it got me home. That was enough gas. So pretty happy with it. Here's a picture of the night vision goggles once again. And yeah, so that's it with the engine. Another unique thing about this Arcus is it has auto flaps. So Morgan Sandercock he's with the Proland project, an engineer. He designed. Dennis Tito wanted to be able to basically have the flaps function automatically when engaged, and not have to mess around with that flap handle, because that's tying your brain into another thing you have to function manually. So he had an auto flap system developed, which basically takes a computer with airspeed, deceleration rate, G load, and it computes the optimal flap setting for that particular speed. So that is it's kind of a special thing with this Arcus that's unique, and that I really like this function.
And they're working electrically?
Yes.
Wow.
Apparently very little battery power is required to drive the auto flaps. I do use them on thermal flights too, and it seems to work out pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with it.
That's about the glider, I guess.
Right. Let's talk about the flight.
About the weather. Of course, I remember Champagne told us, as far as I know, the normal wave season in Minden is in the springtime and not in the summertime.
Correct. Yes.
So what happened? What was special this year?
So yes, it was a very unique. There's a point where you almost turn your brain off to wave flying, because it really doesn't exist for super long flights in the summer, and that's because we just don't get these low pressure systems that push far south enough to give us the energy for a wave system. We might get it for part of the day or in the afternoon, but for the most part, when you're looking at beginning of May or beginning of June, I should say, that's when we all go into kind of thermal mode. So this day was totally unexpected. I wasn't really expecting it, and it can catch you, because if your mind is not thinking about wave, and you're not looking for wave forecasting weather, then it can slip by and you can miss it. But a friend of mine had Kempton Izuno, he texted me and said something about wave, and I'd been looking at it too, and I figured, well, it didn't look, it was, and in actuality, it was far from a perfect wave day. I think on a rating of a 1 to 10, I would say it was probably a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as the quality of wave and the strength. The nice thing about the thing that intrigued me about this wave day was that it was happening this late in the season. We have much longer days, and the temperatures are fairly mild, and the winds on the ground were not forecast to be too crazy. I don't try to worry about the winds too much, because if you do, here in Minden anyway, you'll probably never go flying, because it just, the wind just gets so crazy here. So so for me, in my mind, I saw the weather probably 5 days out, and I thought, well, let's give this thing a go. I haven't flown with the night vision goggles at night, and or for over most of the night. So I wanted to kind of try that out and take off late. Why I took off at 2:30, I don't know. I wanted to take off earlier, but the night before was Father's Day, and my father was in town from Greece, so we did the family dinner thing, and so I ended up texting Bruce, who's Bruce Campbell he's the partner in the glider, and so he just retired from FedEx, former 777 guy, and so Bruce is new to soaring, and I think this is his 4th flight with me in a glider. So the first flight we did I think 1,000-kilometer thermal flight. Then I don't know, a month ago I took him up. We did a wave flight. That was a 2,000-kilometer flight, and this I think being his 4th or 5th flight, he got to enjoy a 3,058-kilometer flight. So he's all my friends are saying, Bruce, this doesn't happen every day, so don't get spoiled. But anyway, so looking at the weather, I knew SkySight is a very, very reliable source for the wave, and I think Matthew Scudder with SkySight, I think his weather application there is really changed soaring for the better. I think it's really allowed us to expand our horizons and go further with the weather forecasting. So one of the problems with Scudder's site was that, as the forecast only goes from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So
that would be my question, because in German, as in our region, it's just working from 8 in the morning.
Yeah, so I go, okay. So Matthew was here back in February. I took him up in the Arcus on a fairly local wave day, and so I kind of maybe it's one of those, hey Matthew, you owe me type favors. But I emailed Matthew. I said, hey, can you do me a favor? Is there any chance you can run the models from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m.? And he knew why. And he goes, when do you want to fly? And I said, well, I'm planning on flying it on the 19th and launching sometime after midnight, possibly 1 a.m. So Matthew was very gracious, and because I know this costs him, it costs quite a bit of money to do this, but he emailed me right back, and he said, hey, your models are going to be running for you throughout the night. So because the wave, I think it was kind of forecast to be a blue wave or with no markers, and the SkySight's a huge benefit, and able to to trust that and fly according to the SkySight. But anyway, he was nice enough to run those models for that night, and so I had to, he sent me an email link, and then that link's tied into SkySight, and I loaded it up on my Samsung Galaxy phone, and then put it in airplane mode and didn't touch it till the flight occurred. So so that was a huge help. But Bruce and I met up at 10 p.m. After dinner. I did not sleep the entire day before, so I got up at 7 a.m. on the 18th, was up all day, went to dinner, and then we met at the airport at night. We had to put gas in the thing, and then we had some fueling issues, and so there was essentially 4 hours of work that we did from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And the plan was just to go out and have fun and just see how these night vision goggles work.
17 hours flight.
So I told Bruce, I said, watch your diet before we go flying, because this might be a longer. If it keeps working, we'll just keep flying, you know. And that's kind of how I am. If um, you know, I think I've made a lot of enemies taking up flying because they expect to be back in 3 hours, and maybe 8 hours later we get back and their feet are frozen. And so I think I'm losing friends. But I gave Bruce a big warning, and I said, hey, just try to get some sleep. And so he didn't sleep either. Neither one of us slept. And so 10 p.m. He'd never used the night vision goggles either. So I brought the second set over to the hangar, and I gave him probably a 20-30 minute briefing on the night vision goggles, and we went outside the hangar, looked up in the sky, and he goes, oh my God, I can see everything, you know, the satellites, and you know. So he was pretty impressed with that. And then we pulled the glider out, and we towed it. It was just the two of us. There's no ground support. So we towed it out. And so this is how unexpected this flight was. I had not even contacted air traffic control to get an IFR clearance. So I have a letter of agreement to go above flight level 180 with the different controlling agencies around in the western half of the United States. So so we were actually pulling the Arcus out with the car, and I called on the phone Oakland Center, and the supervisor answered, and I said, hey, this is Gordon Boettger, and I do have a letter of agreement. Is there any chance I can pick up an IFR clearance taking off in about a half an hour? And he goes, you're in a glider? I said, yeah. So I said, we've got the night vision goggles. And he says, well, we're not too busy this time of the day, so it shouldn't be a problem. So he said he was going to talk to the controllers that were working the airspace at that time, and get that coordinated. So, you know, so this was, as you just based off of that, you can see this is very unplanned, you know. It took about a half an hour to get ready. Just because it's dark and you're trying to get everything in the cockpit, and I had to park the car, and you know, and come back and put our suits on, and start the engine. So off we went. So yeah, the takeoff was like I said, with the night vision goggles on a dark runway, and it was quite windy. It almost got to the point where the winds were getting out of limitations for crosswind. And it's not too fun taking off, you know, with the night vision goggles with a big crosswind. Luckily, the runway's pretty wide, but we got off the ground and got right into wave. You know, I flew to the area where SkySight was showing there was going to be strong wave. I did talk to Matthew Scudder about the forecast that day, and I agreed with him in that. Matthew says, okay, I think the wave will be in the Minden area will be done at 2 p.m. And so I figured my flight would be maximum from 2 a.m. till 2 p.m., maybe a 12-hour flight. So that obviously that's not enough time for a 3,000 kilometer flight. But so I took off and climbed up in the wave and talked to Oakland Center, and they gave me a clearance right away. They gave me a block of altitude from flight level 180 to 240. And then I started off going high on the initial climb just because of the mountains I was crossing, and I'd never done that with the night vision goggles. I just wanted to be extra safe. So we ended up staying high and then ran south. And so the run south along the Sierra wave, it can get pretty difficult until you get to the Owens Valley wave. Luckily, this flight, it was pretty easy, and SkySight was very, very accurate. So thanks again, Matthew Scudder, for doing that. But as we started going south, there's a point where you go into the Owens Valley, roughly around Bishop, where you end up in military airspace. And so there's a controlling agency called Joshua Approach, and they control that airspace. Now you have to put a request in to use that airspace. I have a letter of agreement with them also. And so I did email them on Friday and told them that I was planning on coming into the airspace on Monday morning. So, which was the 19th. So I was probably 100 kilometers north of that military airspace, and Oakland Center said, hey, state your intentions when you get into it's called the 2508 complex. They said, state your intentions when you get into this military airspace. I said, well, I have a clearance with Joshua Approach for today. well, that clearance wasn't until 8 a.m. So why I asked for that time, I don't know. But usually if you're early, it's okay. They'll accept you. And so Oakland Center said, well, I can't let you in that airspace above flight level 180. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, because they're not there until 5 a.m. So it's probably 3:30 in the morning now. So I said, well, don't you control that airspace above flight level 180? They said, no, we don't. So you have to descend below flight level 180. So on the trace, you can see where I'm just northwest of the corner of that military airspace where I dive down below 18,000 feet and then continue south under VFR rules into that military airspace. So I had to stay below 18,000 feet.
I just put it up here. That was
perfect. Oh, there you go.
Turned around it and then descended below it here.
Yeah, so you can see that where and if you go into that airspace above 18,000 feet, they can give you a violation and you can get in big trouble.
Sure.
You can see where I did that hook and I slid in there. And what happens in that area is you can see that terrain. So the Owens Valley starts right at the upper part of that red line that runs east and west where it says R2508. So exactly. So that airspace is controlled by the military, and there's F-35s, F-20, everything flying in there. And if you have that airspace, they give you a clearance for what we call a Sage 2 clearance. So you're operating VFR up to flight level 290 once you're cleared with that Sage 2 clearance into that red area. So unfortunately, on the leg southbound, I had to get below 18,000 feet and fly that entire southbound leg below 18. And then once I turned northbound, I kept calling Joshua at 4:30 in the morning. I said, Joshua, approach, is anyone awake? And, no answer. And then at 4:55 a.m., Joshua approach, says, all aircraft, this is Joshua approach. We're in operation now. And I called him up and I requested that Sage 2 clearance. And so they said, you're cleared Sage 2. And then there you can see on the northbound leg, north of my southern turn, where I start my climb above flight level 180. So one thing that's a little difficult, once air traffic control is, they're not really, they don't understand going back and forth. They understand point A to point B. They don't understand why you would want to go back and forth. So there tends to be some confusion there, because I end up essentially filing probably 6 IFR clearances in the air while I'm doing this, because when I'm in that 2508 complex, I'm under Joshua approaches control. And then when I'm northbound, they say, state your intentions when you're leaving the complex. I said, well, I'd like to pick up an IFR clearance up to, and I just arbitrarily, I just make up an airport north of Reno or something like Susanville. And because they have to put that in their computer as a destination. So when I leave the 2508 complex, they switch me back to Oakland Center. And then I resume my IFR clearance with a block altitude between whatever I ask for. And sometimes they give it to me, sometimes they give me a smaller block of altitude. But if you look northbound, Benjamin, along Mono Lake there, that little lake with the island in the middle, just zoom, no, keep going south.
Yeah.
So Mono Lake right there is, that's an area that generates very good wave. It's a very small area of wave, but there's airline traffic that goes east and west of a high volume of traffic. I know that because I fly that going into San Francisco, but there are times where they don't allow me to be that high, transiting that airspace. Sometimes they keep me at 24 as the highest altitude because of the jet arrivals. So I'm very aware of that. And so that northbound leg, that whole area where the glider is now, that area gets very, it's usually not a solid line of waves. So you have to be very, very careful. And one thing I want to note is that if, like in the Owens Valley wave along the Sierra, because the mountains are so high there, that it's very easy to get into very severe rotor even at 5,000 meters. So, and you can get you can end up very low very, very quickly down in the Owens Valley. So it's for the sake of speed and not getting slowed down, it's always best to kind of, sometimes if you're aware of that you might, there's a gap of no lift, or SkySight shows a very weak area, to kind of slow down and try to stay up high. Because if you get low there, and that's happened to me, you get really beat up, and it's very, very turbulent down there on strong wave days. So, yeah, the northbound leg was fairly uneventful. Nothing really special to talk about there. I ended up hitting so that northbound turn point, as you can see, just northwest of Reno. You see air sailing on the map. So this was forecast, and SkySight was showing that north of there was zero wave. And typically you can go north and pick up that range up towards Susanville, right where the glider is there. You can typically will get in a wave and then make a left turn about 30 degrees from where you see, and then right where the mouse is. And that's about as far as north as you can go typically. And that's exactly right about there. So that was my goal, is to get up that far north on each of these legs, which would have made this 3,000 kilometer easier. But SkySight was showing there was no wave, and visually I could see there was no wave. There was a lot of low level solid clouds, and I didn't see a firn gap or any sign of wave where there should have been wave. So I didn't, on that first turn northbound, I didn't want to go any further north. I probably could have gone a few, and the winds got very, very strong up there. I was looking at, I think, 65 knot winds or something. So my progress was really slow. So that's another reason I turned turned southbound again after that second turn point. Blue wave, no markers. Once you set up that first track of wave, nothing really changed much with the wavelength. So I would say that the southbound leg, the second time, was fairly uneventful. Once again, I went down into the Owens Valley complex and talked to the military folks there. My furthest south point I could go was right where you see was pretty much in Yokern there. And then the wave got very, very weak. And SkySight was also showing that it was going to get soft and the wave was going to quit. Sometimes we can work our way all the way down to where you see California City. Sometimes we can run down there. But as you can see, the mountain range shifts, and that takes more of a northwesterly flow to favor wave to the south. So if we're on a southwesterly flow up aloft, Inyokern for the most part is your southernmost turn that you can do. So for planning purposes, I always plan on Inyokern being the furthest south I can go on a wave day where the winds are out of the southwest. So my third turn was made down there, headed up north again. Once again, the wave was not, usually the Owens Valley wave is extremely strong. And it wasn't really strong on this day at all. It was not a day where you could run along at VNE, which is pretty typical on a strong wave day. So I made that run.
You called it blue wave. Well, actually, it must have been black wave. But at what point did the sun rise? Well,
I mean, the sun rose after I made my first turn point near Inyokern. Right. I was up near Lone Pine, Mount Whitney, and you can see on the still pictures, the sun was still not officially above the horizon. It was starting to come up. So on my second leg,
actually, let's take a look.
Yeah, so it was right there. This is Mount Whitney. So that's where the sun started coming up, and that's, I had already taken the night vision goggles off. So that's where things started going daylight, and it's a little different because you transition from a night mode to a day mode, and doing my 777 flying, I see that all the time. So I was probably used to it, but it's pretty interesting making that transition in a glider from night to day mode. But that picture that you see northbound with the sun coming up on the left side of the screen, that was the essentially my second leg going northbound in Mount Whitney's up, which is the highest peak in the southern U.S. 14,498 feet, I believe it is. So that's the highest point in the U.S. with the exception of Mount McKinley or Denali in Alaska. So I think it starts getting a little confusing with all these legs, but I think I was on my third leg northbound, and there's really, I was staying fairly high. There weren't really many difficult areas on the legs between Inyokern and the Reno area, which is north of Minden. I did have some air traffic control issues on the last leg, and I don't know if we want to just talk about the final leg.
I have a question. At what time of the flight you thought, oh, that might be a 3000 K flight instead of just a training flight for the night goggles?
It's an interesting question. I think that occurred. The whole question on the 3,000 kilometer was, I started realizing that my north and south legs, I couldn't go all the way to Susanville. So all my legs were fairly short, which told me I had to extend that very last leg to make 3,000 kilometers into this weather that was north of air sailing or Susanville, which is, if you move that hand or your cursor go further south. So the weather started just to the right a little bit. So the weather started right about there. That's where all the clouds started, just a little where that first camera picture is. So, but back to the question, I think it happened. I was talking to Bruce. I said, we might be able to pull this off, this 3,000 kilometer thing. It was still a total dream, or I knew it would be very difficult, but I just said, let's just make the decision once we get to the once we get to the very last leg, when we get to Reno, let's make that decision whether we can do this or not, because it was actually dependent on. Remember earlier I said the wave was forecast to stop near Minden at 2 p.m. We're at 5 p.m. now, and I was still working very weak areas of wave. Once again, it was really not that great, but I contacted Reno or Oakland Center on that last leg, and I was near Reno, where it's just south of right there. So on my very last leg, I was near the Reno area, and I actually talked to Oakland Center. I said, hey, if there's a chance I can make a climb here, because they were giving me, I forget what the top altitude was for traffic, but I said, if there's a way we can coordinate for me to climb and to get up to flight level 230, then I could potentially get the longest flight ever in soaring. And I actually said this on the radio, and so I think the controllers really went out of their way to try to help me. So he let me actually stop near Reno, and I climbed up in wave, and I got as high as I got up 23,000. And there were a lot of calculations being done here, where I was trying to figure out how far do I really need to go to get the 3,000 kilometers. And I determined, and their weather had a lot to do with it too, but I determined that, we determined that Alturas would make the beyond 3,000 kilometer mark. So I had Bruce look at the weather, and we're looking at ForeFlight. So he looked at the weather for Alturas, and I was looking at the radar, because I've got a Stratus antenna, and I saw a lot of activity on the radar with the weather in that area. So I knew that was going to be a big issue that could keep us from getting that far. So as we are right where you see the glider now, I just before that, I made the decision that, okay, we can try to make Alturas. We're still a little low for it. And there was a cloud layer that was a pretty solid layer. I knew I had to go below that. I had to descend below that layer because it was completely solid overcast. I had to descend below that layer in order to safely stay outside of the clouds. So I didn't know how far that southern area of that cloud layer was. So what I did was I kind of aimed for the edge of it, and you can see on the trace where I started picking up speed. I just dove below the clouds, and I still, even below the clouds, I had Alturas. I had Alturas made.
Can you tell us where Alturas actually is on the map?
Yeah. So if you see, do you see where I make that sharp right turn? Alturas is about 50 kilometers beyond that. I don't know if it'll show if you zoom into the map anymore. So
yeah,
the problem with the wave in our area is once you get north of that Susanville area, there is a tendency to run into, or air sailing essentially, where you see on the map. Once you get north of that area on latitude wise, you tend to run into a lot of moisture, and that's exactly what was happening on this day. So that was probably my biggest concern, was to safely get to Alturas. And the only way to really, I think the forecast was like 2,000 scattered, then 4,000 scattered, and I think 8,000 overcast. But what I noticed on the radar on my flight, that there were some areas of yellow where there was some rain showers. So where you see the glider now on that map, just north of that, I ducked. I was able to fly underneath this. Finally got underneath this cloud deck, but there was so much weather. We were flying in between snow showers, and flying left and right, and I wanted to fly as straight as possible to get my glide in Alturas, and so it was hurting my glide with my final glide calculation, but there was nothing I could do. I was zigzagging around the weather, and then finally I was able to point in the direction of Alturas, and right where you see that sharp right turn, I ran into, I literally flew up, and there were clouds going to the ground with snow showers and everything. And it was kind of in a boxed area where I could not go any further north. And it's interesting because my OLC distance was showing 2,009. I will never forget this. It was showing 2,988 kilometers.
Yes, it's boring, huh?
wow.
I go, you talk about it, just an emotional letdown. I mean, we worked this hard to get this far, and I ran into completely solid line of clouds to my left, to my right, and in front of me. And there was terrain below, and the clouds were going all the way down to the terrain, with which I found out later were snow showers. So Bruce said, "Well, Alturas is off the nose." I said, "We're not going to Alturas. We can't. Well, we're going to kill ourselves if we fly into this. It's not happening." So earlier I'd seen Cedarville, and I knew Cedarville was on the east side of the mountains, and the mountains hold up a lot of the clouds, and this is exactly what happened today. So I think if I look back, I probably should have initially gone right to Cedarville, but where you see that right-hand turn south of Alturas, right there, I put Cedarville in the computer. It said I was too low to make it to Cedarville. Computer said I couldn't make it. Plus, Cedarville is right where you see the circling on the end of the flight there, but downwind of the mountain range, to go a little right there. So that's where Cedarville is located. So the computer was telling me the direct line to Cedarville was going over the mountains. Well, the mountains were completely covered with the clouds, so I couldn't. Plus, I didn't have the glide to get over the mountains, so I had to go around the south end of that. So as I was going south, I couldn't really get any kind of good glide computer, or any good calculation for a glide. I knew that there were farm fields on the south end of the Cedarville range there that I could possibly land on it. And then there was that dry lake, which is not dry. It's full of water right now. So that would have been a big effort. But right where you see the glider now is where I found myself very low and flying very slow. There were some clouds. I was trying to work some of these clouds, but if you leave that glider right there, this was probably the most difficult part of the flight in a lot of ways, because, first of all, I was tired. We were low. I didn't have proper glide to calculations in the LX. So at this point where you see the glider, I'm still too low to make it to Cedarville, but and there was no weather station at Cedarville either, so I didn't know what the weather was like there. But right where you see the glider, I looked off to the east and I saw what I thought was like a very flat based cumulus cloud. And I told my co-pilot, Bruce, I said, if we can get over this ridge and into the valley, I could maybe get underneath that cloud and thermal up underneath it. So where you see that circling happening, I was able to cross the ridge. I was very low and pretty stressed out here, but I found that cloud and worked up underneath it. And as soon as I was able to look up the valley, I noticed that on top of this, these were actually rotor queue that were sitting underneath a very weak wave lenticular type cloud that was on top of it. So as soon as I saw that, I said, you know, if we can get up underneath this, I can get into laminar flow and then.
And which altitude it was? As you at what altitude you entered here the cloud?
Ooh,
well, it says here this is only about 200 meters, so 600 feet above ground level, but the ground level, of course, is descending towards the valley. So you were basically following the terrain down into the valley, right?
Right. And you know, it's interesting because the computer was showing winds out of the very, very light winds out of the south. Yeah, that's what the LX was showing. And you know, as I was coming up along this ridge by just south of Hat Mountain, I figured, well, if it's out of the south, maybe I can work that little ridge. And then I saw some cloud coming up and over Hat Mountain there, and then, you know, settling down on the lee or on the downwind side of that ridge. And I go, oh, I got to get away from this because this is going to be a lot of sink. So so I made that slight right turn and went for these this one rotor queue cloud and climbed up underneath this and was able to climb underneath the cloud and then finally work my way to the leading edge of it. And then I got above it into laminar flow wave. And I can share the video on that, but it was once I started 2 or 3 turns underneath that cloud, I knew I was going to make it, because I go, I'm going to work, I'm going to fight for this for, you know, it was an important climb, obviously, but once I climbed up and it got the wave, I got into the wave, it went smooth, and you can see on the trace where I actually started climbing. And
yeah, straight flight with very high climb rate. So this is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever soared that valley before? Because it's
Never.
So far off the normal routes which you take.
Yeah, I've never flown there, never been there.
Wow.
The clouds were not telling me there was wave. It was a very interesting sky because you can see in the pictures on the WeGlide, there was it's a very kind of, I call it a confusing sky, but there was just enough energy coming. You know, and the winds aloft were not, well, you can see right there, that does not look like a wavy type day.
Right.
So that off the left wingtip that you're showing now, I believe is Hat Mountain. And you can see where the clouds are sliding down the ridge there. And then once I was able to get a view of the valley where Cedarville is, that's when I visually saw that we had wave. And I went, oh my God, I think I can work this. And as soon as I saw that, I said, I'm back in my element now, you know, because this was something that was defined. And I knew there was the way the clouds were set up. I knew that that just, you know, with a few turns, I could work it and get up underneath this stuff and get back into the energy, which actually happened. And I mean, the feeling of jubilation was incredible, because once I got into that laminar flow, the computer said, okay, now you got Cedarville made. And I knew we had 3,000 kilometers in the bag. So as you can see, we flew past Cedarville, and I was starting to get into, on the north end of that, just north of Cedarville, the clouds started getting very thick, and I started kind of getting closed in. So the wave was falling apart, and I had to descend below a few layers and move to the left and right to go around some clouds, because we were trying to, if you look further north on the map, there's another airport that has a big runway. I don't know if marked there. It is, Yeah.
Well, I guess it's also not on WeGlide because they didn't really think that anyone would ever go there for gliding.
So it's called Lake County. So it's on the north end of the range there, but and it's maybe another 50 kilometers beyond my northernmost point before I turn south. But that Lake County has a very wide runway. Cedarville is a very narrow runway. I think it's 15 meters wide. And with a 20-meter ship, I didn't know how that was going to work out. So what happens is we flew north. We ran into the same issue we did at Alturas, where I couldn't go any further because there was just a wall of cloud going all the way to the ground. And so I made a very tight turn, and had to, there was just a lot of cloud cover that was starting to build up around the glider. So I had to make a really tight 180 turn. And the only reason I went up north is to add a few more miles. And then on the way back, we were celebrating, and I briefed Bruce. I said, okay, here's what's going to happen. The winds were calm. I circled over the airport, and then, I don't know, 1,500 or 2,000 feet above the airport, I said, I'm going to start the engine. We had 17.5 gallons left. So we essentially could have flown somewhere if we wanted to, but the weather didn't allow that to go to Alturas or Lake County. So we were, the flight was over here at Cedarville. So at about 2,000 feet above the airport, I told Bruce, I said, I'm going to start the engine in case we have to go around. I want to have power, because I didn't know I knew there were runway lights, but I didn't know the condition of the runway and how high the lights were off the ground. So we started the engine, and then we circled down, and then touched down, and I brought the airplane. I rolled out towards the left part of the pavement so I can put the right wing down on the pavement, and then we just taxied with the jet up to the taxiway, and then pushed the glider off, and it was unbelievable. I mean, the feeling was, It was pretty special. But that, I would say, that last hour and a half was by far the most difficult part, because of the cloud cover and the weather. It was just, I'd never flown in that part of the country, and it was that leg where I went from Alturas eastbound. Luckily, I was able to pick up some small areas of zero sync. But had I had a large area of sync, we would have been in a farm field, or starting the engine, So that part from west to east was the scariest part of the whole flight. So it wasn't at 24,000 feet.
And that after 16 hours or 16 and a half hours flight.
Yeah, it was 17 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, after 16 and a half hours, you have some difficult part.
Yeah, and it's interesting because being in the military and the airlines, we do a lot of studies on human factors and fatigue and all these things, and how that plays a part in the thought process. And it's interesting because you're really reaching the limits of, I think you're really reaching the limits of human endurance to do this with one pilot. No, I don't think that would be too wise. You have to back each other up with oxygen issues and other things, and towards the end of the flight, and it seems to happen every time, where it just gets down to what we call crunch time, where it's like, okay, now it's time to just stay completely focused and try to get your head together and to make the proper decisions and calculations, and they could be the simplest of math calculations, but I find that you can make bad decisions just due to the fatigue. And I'm sure some of my decisions weren't the best, probably due to the fatigue, but it's hard to say. Overall, I'm very pleased with the outcome and the decision making that we made based off of our fatigue level. So and once again, I've never flown this long or flown in that part of the country, so it's all new, and that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to see if we can stretch this even further, which I think we can. But I was up the whole day before, flew all night, and then landed at, I don't know what time that was, 8 p.m. or something. So you're up for 2 full days, you know, and we didn't sleep that much that night because we didn't have our clothes. So the landing was a little interesting. We started pushing the glider up the taxiway, and it was a very steep slope up the taxiway, and I was about to get in and start the engine and just taxi under power with Bruce holding the wings level. But these 2 police officers showed up, and you know, there's reception, and there's just nothing out there. So these police officers had showed up. My wife saw that we had landed there, so she called the local police department. So these 2 police guys showed up and helped us push the glider off the runway. And then the next question is, where do we sleep? All the, you know, the motels, there are only a couple of them, and no one was answering the phone. So we figured, all right, maybe we'll be sleeping underneath the wing. At least we got the nice warm suits. And you know, at this point, you don't really care, because, you know, you're on the ground safely after having done a flight like this, and nothing really can bother you much, right? So anyway, the police took us in the town, and we found a motel, and, you know, and the lady had 1 room left, and Bruce managed to find someone that was a few rooms down that had a bunch of beer and some some whiskey, and so he brought that to the room, and we celebrated and woke up the next morning. You see that cafe thing. Tim Gardner picked us up with the Cessna 182, so we ended up going to this cafe dressed like that and getting a lot of strange looks, you know. So but it was quite interesting. I do have you know, one thing I have not posted yet. I do have some video from some of the that last leg.
We had 3,000 hours. 17 and a half hours. This is going south. This is going south towards so we turned around from our northernmost point. We're going south, and you see that's looking to the east there. Sutra, baby.
And, so let me just pause that so you can see. This is looking south. So we had already gone as far north as we could, right? And you can see the sky above, where it does have a very kind of a weak wave look to it. Cedarville is just to the left of the nose, where you see the, you know, that green area along the road there. The airport's just north of that, but you can see what we had to come around. That's looking south. So that area of moisture is what we had to come around to go north up into the Cedarville Valley. So
that's the Cedarville, the town of Cedarville. That's looking south again. There's the airport right there.
Not much of an airport.
No, it's real narrow, but you know, we did manage to work out. Okay, so this is coming around the corner. You showed that earlier where the glider was. And so this is that Hat Mountain ridge, I think, off to the left. And the off in the distance, you can see what I'm looking at. See those really flat looking cumulus clouds? That was actually like rotor Q. So that's what I was able to get underneath and fly, climb up underneath. That's looking, that's when we were gliding over the high plateau area there. That's coming around the corner. And so off to the left of if you go around the bend of this mountain and go northbound, that's where Cedarville is, probably 30 kilometers north of that position. But that cloud.
It's awesome that Bruce was able to actually capture that moment, because this was really the key to the 3,000.
That's what I told him.
That's the key point of the flight.
Yeah, because he was sitting there and said, Bruce, you got to get some pictures of this, because this is like the defining moment here, you know, because what happened when we were going east from that, remember when we were going towards Alturas and I had to make a right turn. Well, that right turn, remember I told you was showing 2,988 kilometers. Well, as I was going east, I was hoping the mileage would go up. It sat at 2,900 kilometers.
Yeah.
And I was pulling my hair out because I go, just give me 12 more kilometers. It would not until I went northbound. So I knew I had to get up north. And so Benjamin, you're exactly right. This was a defining moment because I was low over this ridge, and luckily I didn't hit much sink, but I knew that if I got to these clouds, that I could possibly climb up underneath it. And that's where I climbed, but where you see the climb. So that's coming around the corner. Now that's looking on the left side of the screen. That's up towards Cedarville.
Almost looks like Owens Valley.
Yes. And you can see, so there are some fields down there that I possibly could have landed on. It wouldn't have been good, but this is where I climbed up right here, right where that little ridge is. I flew over that and then climbed up underneath that. And you can see how there's a little bit of a wave look to this cloud, right? It's not great, but it told me that the sky was still probably working. And this was, let's play this. So this is when I finally got into that laminar, into that wave, into that climb. And that's what I was looking at. And I knew I had it made now. So that's the sky to the north. So you can see where it was a lot of moisture.
Redo your panel. Okay. It's 3,000 kilometers. Give me a rundown, Gordo. Yeah. 2:30 in the morning. What did you do? At Minden, NBGs on a dark red light on a dark night. So you can see, here you are.
So you can see there, I've got Cedarville made now, obviously with 5,000 over glide, and then we're at 12,300 feet. So I made a good climb, and then on the left you can see the fuel gauge, and then 12,009. So we got 17.7 gallons, and then on the the altimeters, about 12,000 feet roughly. So.
Oh my God. Woo! Way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations, Gordon.
It's beautiful to see you celebrate like that.
Yeah,
Really cool.
Really, that's amazing moments. History of gliding, definitely.
Yep, that's it. That's in the motel. There's Bruce.
And then the only things you had to wear was your flight suits.
Yep. Oh, this was interesting. So this was the flight that I was looking at. So you can see where we had gone around this weather, and then Alturas is up here, but so that's what some of the radar was showing. Yeah. So, yeah.
The next question is, how did you get back home?
So, we had enough gas we actually had enough gas where we could have probably soared home that day. And we ended up, I made a quick determination. I said, we're not going to be able to safely take off, with this wingspan, because if you drop a wing, you're gonna ground loop or rip the wing off. So I called Tim Gardner. He's with the Pearland Project, and said, hey, any chance you can pick us up with the Cessna in the morning? And so he picked us up with the 182 in the morning, and then we flew back with the 182, and then Bruce came up with someone else that day to pick up the glider, disassemble it, put it in the trailer.
Okay, and when was everybody back in Minden?
I was back by probably 10, 11 o'clock the next morning. Bruce didn't get back till 3 a.m. the following morning because he had to pick up the glider. I said, Bruce, I gave you the good time in the glider. I gave you the ride of your life. It's your turn to go pick up the glider. So he didn't have any complaints.
Okay, you have to go to work again. the next day.
That's right.
Yeah, right, really?
No, not me. My
Oh.
father was in town from visiting, so I had to get back to because he was only here for a week, so I had to get back home to visit with them, and I didn't want to take too much time because he was only here for, like I said, a week. So I gave Bruce the job of picking up the glider. So
Okay, great.
So
Yeah.
at the end of such interviews, we always have one final question, Gordon, and you can imagine it's always the same. It's the question, what's next? So if I share the screen again, and we see the map again, you have proven that you are now not anymore limited by daylight. So
Right.
are you limited by geometry?
that's the limit here now. That's a very good point, Benjamin. We I've started looking at this a little closer now because I didn't really think this 3,000 kilometer thing would come so soon. So now that we've done this, now it's to the point where first of all, you got to look at will the FAA approve night flight, in their records. I don't know. That's time will tell with that. But if they don't, that's fine. I'll still keep going further with I think what we're doing. But I think geometry or with geography, I think we're limited with the geography with our we just can't do the north and south runs as far as we can with like down in Argentina. Daylight's not an issue anymore. So I can go on for I can do a 20-hour flight, without an issue, I think, as long as you have two competent people in the cockpit to do that. So the time issue is not the constraint now. So that what that tells me is you can slow things down a little bit, right? You don't have to necessarily fly at that upper top speed and take those higher risks of a land out or having to start an engine. So the time thing is on my side now because of the night vision goggles. So I think geographically we're limited because of our terrain. Like I was saying earlier, typically we end up running into too much moisture to the north, and the wave kind of quits too because of just the geography. To the south, we end up running into a geography issue because the mountains quit. The Sierras only go so far south. So we're, for the most part, north-south wise, we're limited between those 2 points of, for the most part, I would say Inyokern and Susanville. Just along those points.
Between those 2 points?
Excuse me?
What's the distance between those 2 points?
I would just roughly, I would have to look. I would say offhand, it's roughly 500 kilometers. Hang on. Let me just give you a really rough. Okay, so roughly 500 to 600 kilometers. So I started looking at, my goal has always been to go downwind as far as I can. And I think what I would like to also start doing are big triangles in the wave. I think a 1,500 kilometer triangle is very possible. I'd like to start exploring that whole area because I think geographically we're very well suited for a massive triangle in wave from the Minden area. So I would like to start doing that. And I'd like to start working on speed records and things like that. But as far as distance goes, to do a Klaus-Ohm on 3 turn point distance, first of all, I don't think it's possible during the daytime here. Geographically, it's not, because if I ran north and south, I can't do it with I cannot do that with 3 turn points. If I use 3 turn points going eastbound, I can essentially use the turn points that I used on my 3,000 kilometer flight, use 3 turn points, and then go northeast towards Colorado. So to get 3,000 kilometers, I would have to go east of the Rockies, which is actually very, very possible. The problem is you're losing 2 hours of daylight when you go that far east. So there is no way you're going to do that in the daylight hours. That's not, if that's not approved by the FAI, that's not going to stop me from trying that, because I think it's just a personal goal, whether whether it's written down on a piece of paper or not, I could care less. So, and I think it's all about kind of exploring and trying to expand these boundaries that I believe we're not limited by anymore due to daylight hours, you know. And I think it should be encouraged to by FAI or whoever else, if people try to discourage flight in the night. I think that's really trying to that's trying to, I think, cut us short. But because now we can safely do this. This is not being done in an unsafe manner or recklessly. It's being done in a very calculated manner. It's being done very safely. I would never do anything to jeopardize or risk anything for a plaque on the wall. It's just not, it's not worth it, you know? So I'm trying to open the whole door to this whole soaring distancing, because right now, as of now, we've kind of been limited by daylight hours. And if you have energy that's working at night, utilize it, you know. And I don't think why that shouldn't be limited because of a rule, you know. So as long as I'm legal with the FAA or authority here, I'm going to continue to do that and see how far we can go. I think we can. I think if, you know, 4,000 a 4,000 kilometer flight is possible out of here, you know. So, and that would probably be a 6-leg flight.
6 legs.
Yes, with 6 legs. Not, I don't think with 3 legs, I don't think it's possible. But I think exploring the boundaries of going eastbound with maybe flying eastbound and wave to the east side of the Rockies, and then climbing up high near Denver, Colorado, and gliding for maybe 500 kilometers and picking up thermals. I think we can probably get across half the country. It would be an overnight flight, but that's my ultimate goal, is to do a straight line flight somewhere past like St. Louis, which I think is very, very doable, you know. And that's transitioning from obviously a wave to a thermal situation. But before the night vision goggles, I was very limited because of obviously the daylight thing, and you know, safely flying over mountains. You can't do that without the night vision goggles. Well, if now I could take off at 4 p.m, if the wave looks like it's working at night across, you know, California, Utah, Wyoming into Colorado, then I could go ahead and utilize that, and then climb up theoretically east of the Rockies at 6 a.m. and then go downwind and then pick up thermals when they start for the day. And then you have the entire day with thermals. So it's very difficult. The downwind thing is very hard because you're dealing with different air masses typically. And in the past, I find out that I run into a lot of moisture, and there are a lot of road bumps or a lot of difficulties on a straight downwind flight. But it's very, if you have a good weather situation, you can do that. So I think it's possible.
So when we ask this question to our guests, like how far can you go? I think before I have never had to zoom out so much on the map as with you today.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. Gordon, you're a great storyteller. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for sharing this and allowing me to speak with, you know, the viewers out there, and you know, just I think if we can all expand our boundaries, and I would love to see this type of flying, you know, happen in Europe if it's legally possible, or if it can be made possible. I would love to see that. And it's not about, you know, it's all about everyone trying to get out and do the most they can with what they're given. And luckily, I feel very fortunate to be given this opportunity to fly such a wonderful machine and have the weather literally over my head to do that. So I think I have definitely a huge advantage here. So, you just have to have the will and the drive and the enthusiasm for it. So I encourage others to go out there, and whatever boundaries they have, just go for it and do it safely and share it with others.
Thank you very much, Gordon, for your time. Finally, I have our PayPal address for those of you loving our show and maybe have some gift for our young pilots. It's jugend@sfzkdf.de. So if you like to spend some money, we are very happy. So definitely, if you're flying to St. Louis it will be a flight of the month, I promise. We'll see us again.
Yeah, we are very much looking forward to have you back then, or even earlier with whatever else you come up with.
Hey.
Thank you very much. Have a good morning for you. It's evening for us.
Ja.
Matthias, vielen Dank. Schönen Abend und
Ja.
bis später.
Ja, bleib bitte
Danke.
noch ganz kurz drin, wenn wir das Meeting beenden, nicht ausschalten. Ne? Für unsere
Okay.
Zuschauer sagen wir for our spectators, we say bye-bye, see you next time.
Bye.